Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The room was buzzing with excitement. I could hear my mother's laughter ringing through the hallway as she hurried past me, her hands full of colorful streamers and balloons. My father was setting up a makeshift podium, his face beaming with pride. Francesca's piano recital trophy was the center of attention, gleaming on the mantelpiece like a golden idol. I stood by the doorway, unnoticed, clutching a small drawing I'd made earlier that day. It was a simple picture, a sunset over a field, but I'd worked on it all morning, hoping for a moment of acknowledgement. "Jasmine, move out of the way," my mother said, barely glancing at me as she brushed past. "Francesca will be home soon, and we need everything perfect." I stepped back, the drawing crumpling slightly in my hand. My eyes darted to the clock. It was almost time. Francesca would walk through that door any minute now, and I would become invisible again. The air was thick with anticipation, everyone waiting for the star to arrive. My father adjusted the trophy one more time, his hands trembling slightly with excitement. When Francesca finally arrived, the house erupted in applause. She stepped inside, her cheeks flushed, her hair still perfectly styled, clutching her trophy like a prized possession. My parents rushed to her side, showering her with praise. "Look at our little champion," my father exclaimed, pulling her into a tight hug. "We knew you could do it." I stood in the background, my drawing still in hand, feeling smaller and smaller as they crowded around her. I wanted to congratulate her, to share in the joy, but every time I took a step forward, someone else pushed past me. The words died in my throat, replaced by a bitter, familiar sting. "Francesca, you were amazing," I finally managed to say, my voice barely audible over the chatter. She turned to me briefly, her eyes flickering with acknowledgement. "Thanks, Jasmine," she said, but her smile faded quickly as she returned to basking in our parents' adoration. It was as if I had vanished the moment I finished speaking. I watched as they presented her with a cake they had made that afternoon, her favorite, chocolate with raspberry filling. My mother had spent hours perfecting it, making sure it was just right. The same way she used to bake for my birthdays, before Francesca's achievements became the family's main events. They began to sing, and I glanced down at my drawing, my heart sinking. It was silly really to think they'd care about something so small, so trivial compared to Francesca's triumphs. I knew how this would end. It always did. I would slip away quietly, and they wouldn't even notice I was gone. But something in me refused to accept it this time. I stepped forward, my hands shaking, and placed the drawing on the edge of the table, next to the cake. "I made this," I said, my voice louder than I had intended. It felt strange, even to me, to hear it echo in the room. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. My mother turned, her smile faltering slightly as she glanced at the drawing. She picked it up, gave it a cursory look, and then set it back down without a word. "Jasmine, be a dear and grab the camera, will you?" she said, already turning back to Francesca. My chest tightened. "Did you see?" "Yes, honey, very nice," she interrupted, her eyes never leaving Francesca. "Now hurry up. We need to get a picture of Francesca with her trophy." I stood there, the silence roaring in my ears, as if the world had gone mute around me. They were all smiling, laughing, but none of it reached me. I felt like I was on the other side of a glass wall, watching a scene I wasn't part of. I picked up the drawing, crumpling it in my fist, and slowly backed away from the table. As I left the room, I heard Francesca's voice behind me. "Jasmine, where's the camera?" she called, her tone light, casual. "I'll get it," I said, though I wasn't sure if she even heard me. I wandered down the hallway, my footsteps heavy, the drawing still clutched in my hand. I could hear their voices, muffled and distant, like a chorus I couldn't quite reach. When I reached my room, I sat down on the bed, unfolding the crumpled paper. The lines were smudged, the colors faded, but it was still there, the sunset I had painted, bright and hopeful. I stared at it, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. It was then I realized this wasn't just about a trophy or a drawing. It was about being seen, being heard. And no matter how loud I tried to speak, it seemed no one in that house ever truly listened. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting patterns on the floor as I stirred a pot of pasta on the stove. It was a typical Sunday afternoon, one of the few moments I had to myself. Francesca had called earlier, her voice bright and breezy, asking if I could watch the twins for a couple of hours. It'll just be a quick errand, she'd said, but I knew better. Her errands always lasted half the day. The front door burst open, and before I could turn around, 2 tiny whirlwinds barreled into the kitchen, giggling. Francesca followed, juggling her purse, keys, and a tote bag stuffed to the brim. "Thank you so much, Jasmine," she said, dropping the bag on the counter. "You're a lifesaver." I forced a smile, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "No problem. How long will you be gone?" "Just a couple of hours. I need to pick up a few things for dinner tonight," she said, but her eyes darted away from mine, a telltale sign she was stretching the truth. I nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. "All right, I'll take them to the park after lunch." Francesca hesitated at the doorway. "Oh, and can you make sure they do their reading exercises? Their teacher said they're falling behind a bit." I opened my mouth to protest, but she was already halfway out the door, her voice trailing off. "Thanks, Jasmine. I'll be back soon." The door clicked shut, and I was left standing there, the twins tugging at my sleeves, begging for juice. The hours crawled by, and the afternoon blurred into a cycle of snacks, games, and tantrums. Every few minutes I checked my phone, half expecting to see a message from Francesca saying she was on her way back, but it remained silent. By the time the twins had finished their reading and we returned from the park, the sky was beginning to darken, and there was still no sign of her. I was in the middle of cooking dinner for them when my mother called. I sighed, picking up the phone, bracing myself for whatever she had to say. "Hello." "Jasmine, where are you?" she demanded, her tone sharp. "I'm at Francesca's house, and you're not here. What's going on?" "I'm with the twins at my place," I replied, stirring the sauce on the stove. Francesca said she had errands. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of disappointment. "Why didn't you just take them to her house? You know she doesn't like it when they're not home." She didn't say anything about that. I tightened my grip on the phone, the frustration bubbling beneath my calm facade. "She just dropped them off and left." "Well, you should have known better," my mother snapped. "Honestly, Jasmine, sometimes I wonder if you understand how hard it is for Francesca. She has so much on her plate, and you're supposed to help." "I am helping," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "But I have my own life, too." "To you, Jasmine?" The words stung, slicing through the silence like a blade. "Because it seems like all you do is complain about how much you have to do, but you never stop to think about your sister's needs. She has children to take care of." My hands trembled as I stirred the pot, the sauce splashing over the sides. "I'm trying, Mom. But it's always about Francesca, isn't it?" "What about me?" The line went quiet, the silence stretching out painfully, suffocating. "Jasmine, your sister is the one who needs support right now. Just do your part and don't make this about you," she said finally, her voice cold, detached. "I'll talk to you later." She hung up without waiting for a reply. I stood there, the phone still pressed against my ear, the sound of the twins playing in the background, the kitchen filled with the aroma of dinner. But everything felt off, like the ground beneath my feet had shifted without warning. My head spun, trying to make sense of the words that echoed in my mind. "Do you, Jasmine?" The front door creaked open, and Francesca sauntered in, her hair tousled as if she'd just come from a spa. "I'm back," she sang, her smile wide. "I found the cutest dress. Sorry I took so long." I turned to face her, my jaw clenched. "You were shopping?" Her smile faltered. "Yes. Why?" "Because you said you had errands, and I've been with the twins all day, Francesca." I couldn't hide the anger in my voice. "You can't just keep dropping them on me whenever you want." Francesca's eyes narrowed, her tone defensive. "Oh, come on, Jasmine. It was just a few hours. I needed a break. You don't understand what it's like." "I don't understand." I shot back, feeling the last thread of patience snap. "I understand more than you think. But I'm done being your backup. I have my own life, and I'm not putting it on hold for you anymore." She stared at me, stunned, as if I had slapped her. "Where is this coming from?" "It's coming from years of being pushed aside," I said, my voice steady, final. "I'm done, Francesca. Find someone else to help you." For a moment she looked like she might argue, but then she just turned away, her shoulders tense. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll remember this, Jasmine." I watched as she gathered the twins and left, the door closing softly behind her, the silence returning once more. But this time it felt different, less like a suffocating weight and more like the beginning of something new, something that I could finally control. The car was packed, and the engine hummed as we pulled out of the driveway. I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets blur into green fields, a knot tightening in my stomach. I had reluctantly agreed to this family vacation after relentless coaxing from my mother. "It'll be good for all of us," she had said, a chance to relax and reconnect. But I knew better. For me, it was just another week of being the designated babysitter while everyone else enjoyed themselves. The cabin was picturesque, nestled by a serene lake, with the kind of peaceful quiet you'd expect from a vacation spot. But as soon as we arrived, the illusion shattered. Francesca had barely finished unpacking before she dumped the twins' bags at my feet. "Jasmine, can you take them down to the lake while I rest for a bit? The drive was exhausting," she said, not even waiting for my reply before heading inside. I clenched my jaw but nodded, leading the twins down the path to the water. "Come on, guys. Let's see if we can find some cool rocks," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. They skipped ahead, oblivious to the resentment brewing inside me. The next few days followed the same exhausting routine. Each morning, Francesca and my parents planned activities, boat rides, wine tastings, dinners at the local lodge, but I was never included. Instead, I was left behind, responsible for the twins, keeping them entertained and out of trouble. It was as if they'd planned a vacation for themselves and brought me along as free childcare. On the fourth evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sky fade from pink to a deep, bruised purple, when I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Jasmine, I need to talk to you," she said, her tone more serious than usual. I turned, already bracing for whatever lecture she had prepared. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my hands gripped the porch railing a little tighter. She hesitated, her eyes avoiding mine. "Francesca and I were talking. She's really struggling, you know. With the kids, the house, everything. We think it would be good if you moved back home for a while. Just until she gets back on her feet." I felt my breath hitch. "You want me to move back home?" I repeated, my voice barely steady. "To help with the twins?" "Yes, Jasmine," she said, finally looking at me. "She needs your support and you're always so good with them." I shook my head, the words bubbling up before I could stop them. "No, Mom. I'm not doing that. I have my own life." "What life?" She cut in sharply, her eyes narrowing. "You're barely making ends meet on your own. You're still single, no real career. Maybe it's time to face reality. Your sister needs you, and this is how you can be useful to the family." The harshness of her words hit me like a slap. I stood there frozen, trying to process what she had just said. "You think I'm not useful?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Jasmine, it's not about that," she began, but I raised a hand to stop her. "No, I get it," I said, my voice firming. "I'm just the one who fills in the gaps, the backup plan. Well, I'm done. I'm not moving back, and I'm not spending the rest of my life cleaning up Francesca's messes." She blinked, taken aback. "Jasmine, you don't mean that. This is just a vacation. We're all trying to relax." "Really?" I interrupted, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Because it feels like a job, and I didn't ask for it. I've spent this whole week taking care of the twins while you, Francesca, and Dad have done whatever you wanted. And now you want me to do it permanently." The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. My mother's expression hardened. "If that's your decision, fine. But don't expect us to support you when you fall on your face. You're making a mistake, Jasmine." I nodded, feeling strangely calm. "Maybe I am, but at least it'll be my mistake." I turned and walked inside, leaving her standing on the porch. My heart pounded, but for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity, like a fog had lifted. I knew there would be consequences, that this might be the final straw for my family, but I didn't care anymore. I was tired of living my life for everyone else. And as the door closed behind me, I knew one thing for sure. This vacation wasn't going to end the way they had planned. I arrived back from the vacation with a knot of anxiety, like a storm cloud that followed me home. I knew what I had to do, but every step felt heavy, as if I were wading through mud. The apartment was dark when I got back, and I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty wall, replaying my mother's words over and over. You're barely making ends meet on your own. My phone buzzed, startling me. A message from Francesca. Mom said you'd help me with the kids this weekend. I need you here by 9 a.m. My hands shook as I read it, and suddenly something snapped inside me. It was like I could see the rest of my life stretching out in front of me, a never-ending cycle of sacrificing my needs for theirs. Always the reliable one, never living for myself. I dialed my landlord's number, my heart pounding. When he picked up, I said, "I'm renewing my lease for another year." He hesitated, clearly confused. Sure, Jasmine, but weren't you thinking of moving out? Not anymore, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm staying. I hung up, staring at the phone, my mind racing. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. I was making the choice for me, not because it would make things easier for someone else. The next morning, I was woken by a loud knock. I opened the door to find Francesca standing there, looking impatient. She didn't even bother with a greeting. "You're late." "The twins are waiting," she said, already turning back towards her car. "I'm not going," I said, blocking the doorway. She spun around, blinking at me as if she hadn't heard right. "What?" "I'm not babysitting today, or any other day," I repeated, a calm spreading through me. "I have my own life, and I'm done putting it on hold." Francesca's eyes narrowed, and she took a step forward. "You can't just decide that. We need you. Mom and Dad won't like this." "I don't care," I cut her off, surprised at how confident I sounded. "I've been there for you every single time you've asked, even when it meant sacrificing my own plans. But I'm done, Francesca. I'm tired of being treated like the backup option." She opened her mouth to argue, but I could see her falter, not used to hearing me push back. "What are you going to do?" she finally said, a hint of desperation creeping into her voice. "You can't make it on your own." I took a breath, steadying myself. "Maybe I can't, but I'm going to try. I'm going to do it without you, without Mom, without anyone else telling me where I should be." She glared at me, her face twisting with disbelief. "You're being selfish." "Maybe," I said, a strange sense of relief washing over me. "But at least I'm finally being honest." I stepped back and closed the door, shutting out her protests. I leaned against it, my heart hammering, but there was a new kind of clarity in my mind. I wasn't just running away this time. I was choosing to leave, and that made all the difference. After renewing my apartment lease for another year, I decided it was time to make the place feel more like home. The old, mismatched furniture I had scraped together no longer seemed to fit this new chapter of my life. So when I stumbled across a clearance sale offering an interest-free loan, I took it as a sign. I bought a sleek gray couch, the kind you could sink into after a long day, and 3 sturdy cabinets that would finally give me space to organize all the clutter. It felt like a small step, but upgrading my furniture was my way of telling myself that I was settling in, ready to build something lasting. The silence was unsettling, but I was determined to get used to it. I wasn't running from chaos anymore. I was building something new. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Mom. My heart sank, but I knew this conversation was inevitable. I hesitated, then answered. "Jasmine," she said, her voice as sharp as ever. "We need to talk." I could already feel the familiar frustration building. "There's nothing left to say, Mom. I'm not coming back." "You're being selfish," she said, her tone accusing. "Francesca and the kids need you. You can't just walk away from your family like this." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I've given everything to this family. I put my own life on hold, and it still wasn't enough. "But I'm done, Mom. I'm not sacrificing my future anymore." She sighed, exasperated. "We've always supported you, Jasmine, and this is how you repay us? By abandoning your responsibilities?" "No, you supported Francesca. I was just there to fill in the gaps," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to keep putting my life on hold so she can have it easy. I deserve a chance to be happy too." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had that cold, cutting edge I'd heard so many times before. "If you choose this path, don't expect us to be there when things fall apart. You're on your own." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "And that's okay. I'm ready for it." She hung up without another word. I stood there, phone still in my hand, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I had finally cut the cord, but it hadn't been easy. Still, there was a strange sense of peace in knowing that I was starting fresh, even if it meant doing it alone. Weeks later, I heard the news. Francesca had been arrested. She'd gotten involved with some shady people, and it turned out she'd been embezzling money from the company she worked for. I wasn't surprised, but I couldn't help feeling a pang of sympathy for her twins. Mom and Dad were left to pick up the pieces, taking on the burden of raising Francesca's kids. I could see the exhaustion in their faces the last time I ran into them at the grocery store, but I didn't approach. It wasn't until Mom called me out of the blue, her voice weary and strained, that I realized things had changed. "I understand now," she said barely above a whisper. "We were wrong. I was wrong. You didn't deserve the way we treated you. I'm sorry, Jasmine. It wasn't much, and it was far too late, but it was something." And for the first time, I felt like I could truly let go of the past and focus on my own future, free from the shadows that had haunted me for so long.